right. So another great video for Shock Week, and Vincent Barlow calling in from Florida.
Yeah.
Sunny Florida. Vince, welcome, and thank you for taking the time this week to record this session. And hopefully during Shock Week, if we can make it happen, we'll go live together then and field some questions.
That sounds great.
So why don't you do this because I know everybody out there on my YouTube channel has never met you. So
yeah,
and once we get started, it's going to be, I think, a great session. So Vince, why don't you let everybody know who you are?
Okay, so I'm Vince Barlow. I'm a executive coach and trainer, and the main thing I focus on is emotional intelligence. So let me give you a little snapshot. I often get invited from companies to work with people that I say don't play well with others. They might be super smart and they can be right a lot, but their way of delivering that information is not always easy to work with. So I coach a lot of people around the world from companies that are looking at, especially a lot of C-suite people, but also people at the top of the food chain that are have high impact, high potential, but their emotional intelligence is what causes them to struggle. And real quick, the studies show that 62% of the people that grow their emotional intelligence are most likely to get promoted. Because what an emotional person does, emotionally intelligent person does, is they create an environment around them where people feel seen and people feel heard and cared for. And so when I create that environment, people want to be around me, and leadership invokes followership. So these people are like, I want to be on that guy's team. I want to be on that woman's team. And here's why. They see me and they value me and they're calling out the best of me. So that's what I do. I work in that world, and that's kind of the big picture.
Yeah. So I know, just listening to what you said, those individuals who are typically watching my YouTube channel and my content are in the electrical industry. Typically, I'm not going to say everybody is, but many people out there are that watch my materials are in the electrical industry. And when you talk about the topic of people want to be on your team, people want to when you're emotionally intelligent, people want to be around you, etc., and people will listen to you. Right?
Yeah.
So the key, the challenge our industry has, the electrical, and I'm going to speak to the electrical industry and electrical safety. The challenge that we have from a safety perspective is getting leadership support on developing safety plans and implementing a safety plan within our organizations. You'll see organizations that are way over here and they are full bore, all in. You'll see organizations that are way over on the other side of that coin, and they promote doing work, unjustified work, energized. They put lives at risk, and I don't know that they really understand it. And I don't know that they do it intentionally. It's just they haven't experienced loss because of an issue. But being able to speak, I've had somebody call it speaking up and down. Mm-hmm. Being able to change your rhetoric depending upon your audience. And having that personality that says, hey, I want to support this person in their mission, and I understand how it relates to my business.
Yeah. And Tommy or Thomas or however you want me to call you, that one thing, I often get hired to work with someone who is being considered next level to go up to a vice president.
Okay. Is that what you mean? Is that what you mean by C-suite?
Yeah, C-suite would be the corporate, that tops, if it's a CFO or what, all that is generally called C-suite, but anyone in the VP level is generally that top leadership. And so let's say I'm working with a director who generally is one step below that. what you just said is so true. They need to learn actually three languages. One, how do I effectively lead the people that I'm responsible for, that are answering to me?
Right.
What language do I speak to them? Because sometimes that language actually has to be a little bit more direct. It has to be a little bit more, very clear. It has to be, so there's a language for those below. I hate to call it below you, but in the
Yeah.
corporate structure. You also have to know how to speak to your peers. You might be right all the time with the people below you, but if you act that way with your peers, they think you're a jerk because you're always trying to be the smartest person in the room, which is one of the most destructive leadership techniques, because we've all been around it.
Yeah.
People who think every meeting is about, am I going to get a chance to tell them all how smart I am? And so they're always interjecting things in a meeting, and all their peers are like, could you just shut up for a minute and listen? Because we get it. We get that you're the smartest guy here. We don't need to know anymore. Let's be a team. So learning how to speak to your peers, we really have to understand that element. And then the third one is speaking to the top level people. And if you don't mind, jump into this. When I coach people, I tell them there's only three things that the executive team wants to know. Okay. They want to know vision. Do you see the problem? They want to know strategy. Do you see a solution? And they want to know money. Do you know how much it's going to cost and how much it's going to save?
Yeah.
So if you move up to that top level, the people that talk too much at executive meetings, they don't get invited back, let's just say. So if you get a chance and you show up and you're blah, 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 like verbal vomiting over everyone in that executive meeting, they're like, okay, that guy is not strategic. He is technical. He's amazing at being technical, but a strategic person is very surgical.
Right.
They're very good at saying, here's the vision, here's the strategy, and so they know how to sell it. So anyway, that's, to me, the three languages of any corporation. And that's when I coach people. Sometimes I have to deal with them first on how do you speak to the people below you to get them to be willing to run through a wall for you. Right. That is what we want. Number two, how do I speak to my peers so that they all feel like we are equal? And number three, if I want to get invited to the top, I better learn how to speak. Yeah. So that's my job in a nutshell, actually.
That makes a lot of sense. And so I spoke with a very successful safety director at a large electrical contracting firm. His program is completely funded. Okay. And I asked him, I was just amazed at watching and seeing the infrastructure that he had at his organization, and the fact that his leadership was so in tune with it, with what his goals and objectives were. But he was a very passionate person, an individual for safety. And I asked him, I said, how did you get to where you're at within your organization? And he said, look, Tom, he says, I have to speak two different ways. He goes, when I talk to my people in the field who are doing all the electrical work, pulling cable, installing things, he says, I talk to them about getting home to see your family. I talk to them about what happens if you lose your livelihood and you won't be able to support your family, right? They rely on, for the most part, most of their families rely on the individual, whether it be male or female, on the job in the electrical industry for financially supporting the family, if not the sole provider, but a strategic, pair, right? So he says, that's my message down. He says, and then everybody gets it and they get on board. He says, but my message up, he says, is about the money. He says, I help them understand how many lost time outages that we avoided, how many fines we avoided from OSHA violations, all of these things. He says, I have to paint the picture to our leadership that we are worth investing in. Yes. And what you just said, the vision, strategy, and the money, That's exactly what he does. And I doubt,
Yeah.
I think that sometimes you'll have individuals who just, I don't know, get it, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other individuals who need that guidance that says, look, like you said, I might be a great technical, I might be a great electrical engineer, I might be the best electrician who's now in a leadership role. And I've been promoted, or I've been put into a position where now I'm leading a team. I can't act like I did before.
Yeah.
I've got to realize I need to get funded. I need to get financial support. I have to understand my vision, which is being able to recognize the problem. Strategy, you said, is being able to know the solution and how to get there. And then I have to know my costs and my financials. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. So there's a definite relationship between this is the funny part, Vince. You wrote this book, Becoming Unshakable, right? And I love the way your name is perfect, right? Look how could you imagine my last name? I couldn't use that same font. Okay. So, but in any case, when you and I were talking about this a while ago, and you were telling me what you were doing and how the emotional intelligence plays a role in leadership, I could not help but everything that you said in our previous discussions, and why I want to share with everybody who's on the thing today, connects so well in the electrical safety world. I mean, most people, I'm gonna get raked over the coal for this one, but this is a 70E. This is the 2021 edition. We're on 2024. My hard copy I do not have, so you have no idea. I'll get comments on that one. But 70E has an Informative Annex Q, and you and I talked about this because the moment we were talking, I said, man, there's a human performance perspective to electrical safety.
Yes.
So Informative Annex Q is a good one. And then I was just talking with Wes Wheeler from NECA, and we were going over I'm not sure of the title yet, maybe the ever-changing risk assessment, or the dynamic risk assessment, whatever you want to call it. But we all have to do a risk assessment before we do energized work or any type of work. Even if you're going to establish an electrically safe work condition, you have to understand the hazards. And in 110.3 Electrical Safety Program, H, the risk assessment procedure, 2 is human error. And that is where I see what you talk about. I know you talk to executives and people in those roles, but I think your message landing on the ears of safety professionals would play a huge part in understanding why we do what we do on a job site.
Yes.
In electrical safety. I think that whole aspect of emotional intelligence is critical. But what is emotional intelligence? What do we mean when I say emotional intelligence, or when you say emotional intelligence? What exactly are you speaking to?
Okay, so and I want to tie it into what you just said about safety. Yeah. So number one, emotional intelligence is basically 3 things. Number one, I'm self-aware. So, which means I know what's going on inside of me. So I know when I'm happy, sad, scared. It's funny, I was coaching a guy, no surprise, he was an engineer, and he goes, Vince, I have 2 emotions, really, really angry and really, really happy. And he goes, other than that, I really don't know what else is going on inside. And he goes, I actually don't know. I'll wake up really, really happy, and then all of a sudden I'm really, really angry, and I'm not sure what happened. Mm-hmm. So it's funny, for an engineer who knows cause and effect, he didn't know the cause and effect when it came to emotions. And I was actually raised in a family where feelings were the F word. Like, that was worse than, we didn't do feelings in my family. Okay. And so how was I going to learn it? Because I didn't have any healthy models saying, hey, you look like you're a little sad today. Come here, buddy. What's going on? No one helped me process what's going on inside of me. So number one, a person with emotional intelligence simply is self-aware and they're not afraid of feelings. Let, let me digress a little bit. The reason I was afraid of feelings. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
My dad was an electrical engineer, and General Electric back in the 40s, came right out of Notre Dame, had been in the Navy doing, early radar. So he's a very strong, super smart guy. But his emotional intelligence, my dad, he knew when he was happy and he knew when he was pissed. And we lived in a world of, oh crap, what's going to trigger? Yeah. And so what I call hypervigilant, which means I'm always like, okay, and some people I know, I coach them, is like, when someone raised their hand by them, they're like, oh, you can hit me? It's like, okay. And so anyway, if I didn't learn how to process emotions and I only use fear to live by, I'm actually kind of not very equipped in the area of understanding what's going on inside of me. And that just takes work. It just takes some self-reflection time where most people don't want to do that. Right. They don't like it. They feel it's stupid. So number one is I'm self-aware. Number two, I know how my emotions impact me. So for example, I know you talk to people and say, hey man, you look a little upset today. I'm fine. Everything's fine. They're completely unaware that their face and their body language is telling me something, but they're not in touch with it. Yeah. So number two is I'm aware of what emotions do to me. And number three is the big one, Tom. I know I impact other people around me. Yeah. And so a person with emotional intelligence creates this environment around them where people feel safe and valued because this person's in touch with themselves. They're not misusing their emotion. They're not being threatening. They're very open, but they're not afraid of dealing with things. They're really good at that. Right. But it's this place, it's a boss you've ever had where you're like, no matter how bad you screwed up, you go tell them. Yeah. Now those are emotionally intelligent bosses. The ones that you're terrified of are the ones that you're waiting for them to have the big club. And so we hide our mistakes. Yeah. So emotional intelligence, if I grow it, the biggest part in the title of the book, Becoming Unshakable, is when I get to a point where no one or nothing outside of me is triggering me, and I feel solid everywhere I go, whatever I do, then I can go to work in a really traumatic safety situation, and I'm not getting I'm calm. I see the problem. I see the solution. It doesn't matter how many people around me are screaming. It doesn't matter. I focus because I have emotional intelligence.
But a lot of that's not controllable, is it? I mean, if you think about I know if I get upset, if I get I don't know, let's say it's an emotional scenario, somebody passes away or something like that, or somebody gets hurt, right? And I know about it. The challenge is to control those emotions. Yeah. And is there a time when you just say, look, I know I'm not going to be able to control this. I need to remove myself from the picture here.
Yeah. And that's a great example because so what you brought up is the difference between repression and self-control. Repression is I bury every emotion because I don't want to feel it and I want to control it. So people used to say about me, wow, Vince, you never get upset, because I was so dang repressed. I was happy all the time. Yeah. But I wasn't happy all the time. I just buried it all. Right. You turn 40 and guess what? Any of that crap that you thought was staying in the bottom of the outhouse, there's an explosion happening and it's coming
Right.
out. So we move from repression to an emotionally intelligent person who has self-control. So quick little antidote. Imagine, Tom, you're on an you're in a busy day.
Uh-huh.
The elevator opens up, you're going up a very tall building. The elevator opens, it's totally packed, and you're the last guy on. You get right in front of the door where the divider is, door closes, and it's rising up, and someone starts poking you in the back with a stick.
Okay.
And they're poking you, and you're having a crazy day already, and this person is poking you, and by about the 10th floor, you are thinking, I'm going to turn around and rip this person a new one.
Yeah.
And you turn around, and it's a blind person.
Yeah.
Where'd all those emotions go?
Oh, yeah. No, you're right.
You control them because you are 100% in control of your emotions. No one can say, well, you made me hit you.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And
you made me yell at you.
Yeah. And when you act on those emotions, it's that other individual controlling you. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So when we do the work, and honestly, picture how many hours you spent studying. You got your degree in what? Which engineering degree?
Electrical.
Okay. So how many hours, like,
oh, geez.
I know you spent a lot of hours studying.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. I'm a slow learner.
So why would we think that it wouldn't take us a serious amount of time to learn emotions?
Yeah.
As much as it did for you to learn electrical engineering. Because electrical engineering existed before you got there.
That's true, yeah.
Your brain just needed to learn how to understand it, and now you're really successful in electrical engineering. So I was like, knew zero about emotions. But when I started really digging into this, I'm like, I'm going to get my 10,000 hours in emotional intelligence.
Wow.
And so I did the work, the conversations, the self-reflecting, and now I'm in a place where I get invited by a lot of top corporations to come and help this person who we really want them to succeed, but they blow up every meeting. They cause great people to leave the company.
Yep.
Please help them. And I come in, and that's my job.
That's interesting. And if you think about, if I bring that over to a 70E example, like on a job site, here's the challenge. Now, in general, just that same executive. When you have, say, 6 or 7 people either in a meeting or on a job site, okay, and you have that one person who is, to how you described it, he blows up or whatever, right? He's the one who's not in control of, he has no self-awareness, right? He's not in control of his feelings. He can impact the entire meeting. So as a person who, say, is very emotionally intelligent, okay, and I can, and say that's me in this meeting with that individual. The moment I know that what is occurring, how does everybody else respond, or how do you get the situation back under control? Right? I mean, it's very important on a job site, right? You can't from an electrical safety perspective. I mean, that is like cancer, right?
Yes.
You have to figure out how to deal with it when that is occurring. Do you coach people in that regard?
Actually, I do. So we talk about, let's say you're working with a very difficult person who could be the president or CEO of the company.
Okay.
And you might have meetings without that guy, and your team they line up, they get it, they're working together. But every once in a while, he wants to interject himself into your meeting.
Right.
And let's say you shared some data that he hadn't prepared or hadn't really looked at, and he misread the data totally that you're presenting, and he just blows a gasket.
Yeah.
So step one, be unshakable. Never join someone at their level of intensity. Okay? So your emotional intelligence, number one, is so humans are naturally empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
If people were watching, like you talking to someone, you've seen yourself do this, and they cross their arms, you'll probably cross your arms.
Yeah.
They'll scratch their face, and you'll be like, oh, is he trying to tell me to scratch my face? Like, you'll sit. We're naturally empathetic. When you learn emotional intelligence, if someone starts taking over the emotions of the meeting, your stability and your calmness, even if they're going off the rails, never join them.
That's a good point.
So it's tricky. This is doctorate level emotional intelligence. That kind of stuff, and I've been in those meetings where it's not fun. So, or you get a person who everyone knows is just a cruel person. They want everyone in the meeting to look stupid. Their intent always seems to me to be undermining, right?
Right.
You've been around them. And again, we don't fight fire with fire. So we find ways to diffuse the meetings. But sometimes, honestly, and I've had to do this, I actually say, I think we need to pause this meeting. Can everyone look at their calendar right now? We're going to redo this because right now, this meeting is not, there will be zero chance right now that this meeting is going to produce anything except bad. So can we all agree right now, we need to stop? And if that person won't stop, I still have at times, because I get invited into some of these meetings as a consultant, and I'll actually we're taking a break right now. Everyone can step out of the room. I need to talk to this person. Now, that's because you had a coach there. And the person actually said, Vince, if I exhibit that behavior, call me on it.
Yeah.
And I had to. But you guys can't do that because you're not in that level. But someone's got to be the voice of reason that says, this meeting really needs to stop. We are going over the cliff. Nothing good's happening here. I thought we were here to do this. So we have some things to clear up before we get back together.
Yeah.
That's to me, because the other option is you just try to be louder than that person, right?
Right. Yeah.
Those are fun meetings.
Oh, man, yes. I've been in a few of those. But now, on a job site, if you think about, the electrical worker, and you have a group of people who are on a project. We go through NFPA 70E, and one of the fundamentals of 70E is hazard awareness, okay, in my opinion. That's a fundamental principle is I can't dress for the hazard. I can't do anything unless I understand how to recognize the hazard. So we all are trained in awareness of what the electrical hazards are.
Yeah.
So when we're in a situation, either on a project or on a job site, worst case, you're doing energized work, and one of the individuals or two of the individuals are having one of those moments of, this is the way we do it, that is the way, no, this is the way I think we should do this, or whatever the situation is. You've got this dialogue going on. Being able to recognize that as a hazard, right?
Yes.
That's the other aspect in my mind. What I'm thinking, that's a part of the hazard.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Because if I put you in fear mode, so if I just took my crew, let's say I have 8 guys, and I'm just pissed, and I'm right, and I'm going to sledgehammer this nail into the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And the team is like, I think we're not looking at the whole picture here, and I'm pissed. No, I'm right. We're doing it this way. What we do is if we keep driving that, I mean, it's And if the culture doesn't allow, if your company,
Yeah.
this does have to come from the company that says, we got to learn to go slow, to go fast. We don't dive into a problem. We pause.
Yeah.
We look at the problem. We look at the solution.
Yeah.
And then we all agree, let's go forward on this. But when we're going like this and no one's working together, it's like watching a team, a basketball or football team, and they're not in sync. And you're like, you guys suck. You can't catch a ball. You can't shoot. Like, they're bad because no one is operating in. So unless your company gives you that power, that's a tricky one, Tom, is how do we do that?
And you know what? 70E has some basic fundamental principles to help us in that regard. And here's one of the elements in 130, Article 130 is what's called work involving electrical hazards. Okay. So we know we have electrical hazards and we're going to be doing work involving electrical hazards. There is what we call a work permit. So you have to fill out some paperwork. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are the elements. Description of the circuit and equipment to be worked on. Number 2 is description of the work to be performed. You have justification for why the work must be performed energized. You have description of the safe work practices that have to be employed. The results of a shock risk assessment, an arc flash risk assessment. You have to have, so maybe we control that experience by giving specific work plans, right?
Yeah.
So you take that element of, I want to do it this way, and you say to do it that way because you've prescribed how the work needs to be performed.
Yeah.
So you should be able to avoid those, some of that dynamic human, what do you call it, in 110.3H risk assessment. In the risk assessment, you have human error. The risk assessment procedure shall address the potential for human error and its negative consequences on people, processes, the work environment, and equipment relative to the electrical hazards in the workplace. And then they point you to the Informative Annex Q. So this concept of having that scenario on a job site where you have the disagreements and dialogue, you can minimize that through proper planning.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That could
That's
be
good.
It's almost as if somebody, I mean, to put together a safety plan, I think now I'm much more, how would you say, it's like, Vince, it's like sometimes I'm in a dark room. Okay. And I see the light bulbs and I see some areas, but there's still some dark areas. And every now and then a little light bulb goes off and you go, oh, wow. I see how now this relates. And I'm having one of those moments right now because when I think about what you're saying with regard to emotional intelligence and just that example of a meeting and you have that one individual who can make things go awry. If I sat down and said, look, before that meeting, this is why I love agendas on meetings.
Yeah.
If you have a good detailed agenda, you don't have what I call scope creep, right?
Yeah.
And if you do, you can recognize it and go, hold on, where does this was not what we were.
Perfect.
Yeah. Let's get this back on cue. So now you can minimize those diversions.
Yeah.
But somebody has to be the foreman, right?
Yeah.
Someone has to sit down and go, all right. And there's pre-job planning requirements in NFPA 70E where you're supposed to sit down before the work begins and say, all right, what are we working on, everybody? These are the hazards. We're going to be working on that piece of equipment right there. This is what we need. These are the only tools allowed on the site. Okay?
Yeah.
So you have your list of tools. So no one's going to be bringing their own stuff to the table, right?
Yeah.
To increase those hazards. So if you make a regiment out of it, some people love that life. Some people I hate. think about our dialogue today. Did we sit down and go through a bunch of rehearsals? Did we come up with, okay, here's the script we're going to follow?
Yeah.
That's not me, right?
Yeah.
So some people love that and some people hate it.
Yeah.
And when you're working on a job site doing something where you're going to put lives at risk, having that regiment can be your saving grace.
Exactly. And one tool that I use when I do training for EQ, we call it, are you a fireman or a farmer?
Ooh.
So a fireman comes into his office every day and his desk is on fire. And all he does is he spends the whole day putting out fires. And he feels good about himself because at the end of the day, the last little wisp of, glowing ember is put out. And he's like, I did it. I put out my fire. And the next day he comes in and his desk's on fire again.
Right.
Or you could be a farmer. A farmer in January says, okay, in October, I want a silo full of corn. Then he reverse engineers back to January and says, okay, what do I do in January?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm gonna order the fertilizer. What do I do in February? Okay, I got to talk to that guy about when he's going to plow. What do I do in March? I do the first turning of the field. What do I do in April? So now he methodically got his full silo full of corn.
Yeah.
Because if a fireman wanted to grow things, he'd never get anything grown.
No.
He would have said, what'd you get? What crop did you get this year? Oh, I didn't get any crops, but I put out a lot of fires. Yeah, that's nice. But our animals, they don't eat that,
That's right.
And so, yes, there's a place in the world for firemen, but in the electrical world of trying to make things safe and work well, it's not the ideal personality type.
You're right.
For that. And so what happens is the old model, the old crew leads, the old whatever you used to call them in electrical world, tended to be the brash, loud, extroverted, I'm right type of personality, because there's a fire and they're like, okay, everybody, let's go put out the fire.
Yep.
But you guys are trying to shift the industry away from that model.
That's true.
Into a farmer model, which is, how about if we don't have the building burned down, let's figure out how to methodically do this. And so we have to shift our thinking. But here's the problem. I'm throwing a lot out there today.
No, yeah.
There's a thing called Gestalt. Gestalt was a guy that did a lot of sociology, but there are archetypes of, like, are you a rescuer? Are you a peacemaker? If you're a rescuer type of guy, or you want to be the hero, you tend to want to be the guy that, even if 9 people on your team say, hey, that's not the right way, we're not thinking through this, the hero is like, I'm here, come on, let's rally the troops and dive in. And everyone's like, well, like you told me the story.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, there's something live here, and we might kill someone in this building.
Oh, yes. That is exactly
right. What was that
right.
story you told me?
Oh, yeah. That's a very good point. Okay. So I was talking to Dan Carnevale, and in fact, it will be, once I put it all together, on Dan Carnevale's video for Shock Week. And he pointed out the fact that this is the thing, Vince. I'm talking to different people. And everybody I'm talking to, I can relate back to this session right here. So he brought up the case of an individual who was brought over to a site, and they had a breaker trip, and so the building was out of power, and so they bring in the electrician. The electrician comes in, he looks over, and he says, "Oh, well, here's the problem. This breaker here is tripped, and it supplies power to all of these locations that are currently out." Explains the scenario. And the owner says, "Well, I'll turn it on." And he goes, "Well, I can't. There's rules." I mean, he understood.
Yes.
He understood hazards. He knew what the hazards could be. He understood the law, OSHA requirements. Okay.
Yeah.
And so he looked at it and he said, "Well, I can't just turn it on because we have to understand why it tripped in the first place." under the pressure of that individual telling him, the guy who's paying him, right?
Yeah.
Under the pressure of that dialogue, he had the ability to not cave to saying, all right, let's just turn it on. He asked some important questions. He said, I have to understand why I tripped. He goes, is there anything else going on in the building? And the owner goes, well, the only thing that's going on is we have an HVAC guy up on the roof and he's working on the equipment up there. So they were like, well, let's go take a look. Let's go see if he did something. And when they went up there, he was injured. Okay. He had an event. And if they would have energized that, they could have killed him. Okay.
Wow.
So he basically stood his ground.
Yeah.
And if there's any definition, in my opinion, he may not be the most emotionally intelligent person, but for that moment right there, he demonstrated,
that's right,
I think, everything that you're talking about.
Yeah. And you got to be willing to do that. And especially if you move out of fireman mode into farmer mode,
right?
You got to have that steadiness to say, look, I know why these rules were made, not to make your day bad, not to ruin your life. These rules were made to save lives.
Yeah.
So I'm here to save lives. I'm not just here to make electricity go into this building. I'm actually here to save lives. So now I know what my crop is.
Mm-hmm.
My silo is filled with lives of people, dads and moms and sons and daughters who didn't get fried by an electrical thing.
That's right.
Because I did my job. So that's my harvest, and I'm a farmer. And so it's all our perspective, but you're always going to run into people who are like, but I got to fix this right now, and I need to turn this power on, and don't you know we're having this party? Or it's like, no, I'm going to check this out. And so it's a tricky thing.
It is. And you said earlier, and I wrote it down because I call these little nuggets. You're giving some really golden nuggets here. You said, don't join them at their level of intensity. Right.
Yeah.
So if I'm sure that the owner trying to get the electrician to turn the breaker on was not just like, hey, could you turn that on? Right. It's not, it probably wasn't a nice, calm situation.
Yeah, no.
It was I want it turned on. I need it turned on now. And I'm sure that emotion was probably getting escalated. Okay.
Yeah.
But the electrical professional was able to say no and ask the right questions, because, whenever this to your earlier point of, when you're in those moments, you have to understand what it does for you. Do you think we think clearer when we are emotionally charged? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
So this person had to have their stuff together to be able to say, in response to a person who was one goal in mind, turn that breaker on, to be able to say, no, let's think about this first and go through the process of identifying why it tripped. So,
and that's a perfect story, because, so let's think about, actually, I've done brain science studies that go along with emotional intelligence. When I feel threatened, yelled at, whatever, powered up on, what almost always happens to all of us is the front of my brain turns off, and all my electrical impulses go to the back of my brain, my amygdala, and I have three choices: fight, flee, or freeze.
Yeah.
I make very poor choices when the front of my brain is turned off. If I do not learn how to stay out of fear, I really suck at making decisions.
Yeah.
And I look back at my life, and a lot of my worst decisions were made when I was in fear, because what was I trying to do? I was either fighting, fleeing, or freezing.
Yeah.
And so that same guy, that electrician in your story, he kept the front of his brain on. He said, nope, we got to follow this. They built these rules for a reason. And the truth is that president of that company owed that guy a really nice steak dinner, because he actually saved him millions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely.
If he would have fried that guy on the roof.
Absolutely. Plus, so you think about this. This is the human aspect of things. You have the potential loss of life, right? The owner,
Yeah.
the owner has, and the person, just think about it. If I was the electrician and I turned the breaker on, I have to live
Oh,
the
gosh.
rest of my life knowing
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I accidentally killed somebody because I broke some of the fundamental rules that I've been
That's right.
taught. You know,
Yeah.
and that has to be very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, that's good.
yeah, I tell you what, and that's what I'm saying. I can think of so many ways what you do overlays with electrical safety. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So now your book, Becoming Unshakable. Now you separated, and I really like the way you did this. I need my spectacles. You wear them all the time.
Yeah.
I throw them on and off as I need them because I have this. My range has changed. I can see further now. Before I needed my FARs, my glasses to find things like like my cell phone, my truck, and stuff like that. But now I can read signs and things like that pretty far away. I don't know. They say your eyes change when you get older.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
All right. So in your book, you laid out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different types of what do you call them? These are your emotional intelligence. What do you call your titles? You have self-awareness, self-expression.
So there's 5 areas, and under each area there's 3 separate categories.
Okay.
Under those areas. So let me share a big picture. I'll use a little bit of an electrical thing. So what we believe, there's 15 areas total that make up a healthy human. Okay. And what you'll see is so there's 15 different emotional abilities that make up a healthy human. And so let's think of this in terms of capacity. The cool thing about EQ is that I can improve these areas. Whereas your personality type, they take a Myers-Briggs test, will tell you if you're introvert, extrovert, you're generally not going to change. You are what you are. Mm-hmm. But with EQ, we can actually change it. So let's say, talking about Tom, and he's got 15 areas of emotional intelligence. So picture this as a breaker panel in your house.
Okay.
Got 15 breakers. And let's imagine that every room needs 15 amps of power. Okay.
Yep.
And so the breakers you got 15 amps in most of them, except your kitchen only has a 5 amp breaker. So every time you plug in your toaster and your microwave, you blow a fuse.
Uh-huh.
So if you think about emotional intelligence this way, I have these areas that are just like breakers, and they show capacity. Yeah. I have some areas of high capacity where I'm pretty strong, but then I have areas of low capacity where I blow fuses.
Right.
And so let's say I came to your house, Tom, and we're having dinner, and you plug in the toaster microwave and you blow a fuse. You're not all embarrassed like, oh my gosh, I blew a fuse, I can't believe it. You're like, I blew a fuse.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna go down and fix it.
I coach people. You go downstairs and fix it until you actually fix your panel. But what we teach with emotional intelligence, we first assess our capacity. We first honestly look at it and say, you know what? This area, like empathy.
Yeah.
Most engineers in general have pretty low empathy. Engineering attracts a type of person that likes details and solving problems more than it likes really caring for people.
Okay.
In general.
Yeah.
So your breaker in the empathy area, and if you read the book, it'll show you your breaker in that area, you're probably like, wow, I got a 5 amper in there. I'd like to grow my capacity in empathy. But problem solving is also a area of emotional intelligence. And your problem solving, Tom, probably if I gave you this test right away, your problem solving is like, wow, he's actually got a 20 amp breaker in there. Like he's got more capacity to handle problems. But your optimism, and you're more optimism, so you're probably high capacity and optimism. So what happens when I coach people? I first take them through an assessment of their breakers, of their capacity. And they're like, yeah, I'm doing pretty good here, but boy, I like my emotional expression is really low, which means when people are around me, I'm kind of like a cardboard cutout. I'm like I don't give them much connect to,
right?
Or I'm too emotionally expressive, which means, can you dial back the tears and the insane laughter? It's like, you're too much. We're looking for balance.
Yeah.
So we're looking for, how do I become a balanced person who creates a culture around me where people feel safe and valued? So in those areas, so there's 15 areas, and in the book, it gives you a little bit of a self test. But the bigger ones are self-awareness. And that's the one where I said it's really knowing yourself. Second one is self-expression, which is how do I communicate and connect to people? Number 3 is interpersonal. How do I relate in more one-on-one relationships? How do I do in that?
Sure.
Then there's decision making. Am I good at problem solving? Am I good at reality testing? It's like, am I really clear at those things? And then the last one is stress management. Like, does stress control me, or do I control stress? So things like that. And we would go into, there's 15 areas, but those are the 5 categories that, and then, so my number one thing I want people to do is, number one, so Tom, if you went in and you told me, you go into a job site and a breaker popped, you go through a very regimented thing and say, what happened here?
Right.
Something did, and that breaker is a gift to me. So I'm going to go find out what the breaker found out that I can't see.
Right.
And I go find out the problem. I want your people to do the same thing with emotional intelligence. Like, let's just look at the panel and say, I got 3 tripped breakers here. My breaker in empathy, man, I must have no empathy, because, wow, that popped early. But so whatever it is,
right.
Then we assess. If I was coaching someone or leading them through, is that we assess and we say, okay, let's talk about why that's there. Oh, I see what that is. Then we grow your capacity, and now the breaker doesn't pop.
That's interesting. Now, have you ever had, like, let's say you're dealing with one individual, in a company or whatever. Have you ever taken like, say you have a person who is who's on at work on a leadership team or whatever, and taken this, you said you have to do a self-assessment.
Yeah.
Have you ever taken that and said, look, what do other people think you're strong in and weak in? And could I take this self-assessment and come off with something that is different than what other people perceive me to be?
Yeah. And I actually, one of the tools that I offer to companies is called a 360. So let's say that they wanted you to advance more your company, but some people were complaining, yeah, Tom does this great, but he's blind over here. So you would pick 8 to 12 people.
Yeah.
And you would invite them to say, hey, my coach is going to interview you, and I'm going to ask them 2 questions. Tell me what Tom does really well. And give me details. Then I'm going to say, if you were Tom's boss, what would you encourage him to grow in? What would you encourage him to see about himself that maybe he doesn't see?
Yeah.
I put that into a full report, and then I just coach that person. I hate the way some people do 360s where they do a survey and then they dump it on the person like, well, these 10 people said you're a jerk. Well, thanks. Like, what's that mean? How do I fix that?
Yeah.
I take it and I actually never give them all that people said. I boil it down, and with your supervisor, I say, okay, over the next 8 sessions, I'm going to coach Tom about the way that he makes people feel stupid when he starts acting like he's the smartest guy in the room and people start disappearing. Okay, I'm going to talk to Tom about that, or whatever it is.
Right.
Then I coach directly to those things. And I would say 90% of the time, these people see themselves because of emotional intelligence. And I use the EQ model. They're like, oh my gosh, really? Is that me? I don't want to be that.
Yeah.
I don't want to come across that way. And so I come and I help them grow. So Tom, let's imagine your boss came to me and said, Tom keeps screwing this up. If he doesn't change in 2 weeks and get more empathy, I'm firing him. Tom, we could probably come up with some things in 2 weeks that are pure fear that'll make you look like you have empathy.
Yeah.
But you didn't find out the root. I believe we go back, figure out where the breaker popped and why.
Mm-hmm.
And because if I do it your way, I call it putting a jumper wire around a breaker.
Right.
Which you all know is the best way to burn a house down.
Yeah. Yeah.
The first old house I bought a 100-year-old house, and it had 30 amp power in 2 round fuses. And I'm like, and when we moved in, every time we'd plug in a few things, bam, lights out.
Yeah.
So one guy said, well, here's what some of your neighbors do. They put a big wire here. They jump right around this fuse box.
Wow.
I'm like, but he said, good chance you'll burn your house down, but it'll solve your problem. Tom, what we tend to do, let's say you're a pain in the butt and you're on my team, but because you won't learn or grow, I have to put a jumper wire around you.
Yeah.
And we all start trying to avoid Tom.
Ah, that's interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what does everyone on the team learn? Here's how to keep Tom from blowing a fuse.
Yeah.
You don't talk about, don't say that. Ah, okay, yeah, bring him cookies. Okay. He's like a 2-year-old, freaking 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And so we build it, we put a jumper wire around that person rather than keep pushing their capacity. They need to grow capacity.
That's interesting.
But it's going to take strategic leadership skills to grow some of these people because all their life, they've never been told they're wrong.
Yeah.
I had one guy, literally, I was coaching. He was a senior VP in a medical group. He's one of the top doctors in the country, and he was next to be CEO. He told me in his entire life, he missed one answer on one test in all his schooling when he was in 8th grade. Never, ever had another answer wrong.
Wow.
So picture what I call these golden childs. All their life they've been, oh, you're amazing, you're fantastic, we love you. And then their team starts saying, hey, could you not do that?
Yeah.
What? Who do you think you're talking to?
Yeah.
I'm the golden child. I'm the smartest person that ever existed. Emotional intelligence helps people see each other, themselves. And I actually love coaching people like that. It's very fun, actually.
I can imagine. But that is, like you say, it's a big change. So the first step is to understand and do that pre-assessment, evaluate yourself, and you have the self-awareness, self-expression, interpersonal decision-making, and stress management.
Yeah.
Then you go into focusing on 2 or 3 of the characteristics to dig into and figure out where you need to grow. Like you said, find those areas where you need to grow, and then you focus on those. And then what's the third step?
So what we do, then I would say, so let's use you as an example.
Oh, boy.
You did the pre-assessment and you found out these 3 areas you have low capacity. And so you decide, out of your 15, let's go after these 3. So now we're in step 2. We've decided, here's our path. We're not going to fix all 15. We're going to fix 3. So we go after 3. And again, we're going to use a little basic problem solving. Number 1, let's say I had my first coaching session with you, we came up that you needed work in empathy, self-control, and optimism, whatever.
Okay.
I would say, before we talk next, Tom, I want you to simply, you're not fixing anything. I want you to go into observation mode.
Okay.
And all you're going to do is observe yourself. So let me give you an example. I had a lady, her independence score, which is 1, her independence score was way too high. You should be between a 90 and a 110 on the test I give. She was at a 132. So she thought it was great. Wow, look, I win. I'm like, no, too much independence is bad. So what do we do? There's 3 things. Number 1, before we talk next, just observe yourself and say, am I possibly too independent? Does it always have to be my way? She goes, well, I think I could watch for that. Number 2, I want you to gather data and get me some stories, because number 3, we're going to come up with an action plan. She goes, well, how do I do the number 2? I said, well, all I want you to do is this. This was before COVID. I said, the next meeting, she was the team leader. Next time you talk, all I want you to do is watch everyone in the room's body language when you speak. She goes, okay, I can do that. She called me the next week, Tom. She said, Vince, everyone on my team was a jerk this week. I'm like, really? Like, what'd they do? She goes, well, I was talking. I had this fantastic idea. It was really great. And they started fidgeting. Then they're looking at their phones. Then they started sneaking peeks at their computer. And then when I was done talking, they went on to the next agenda point. No one asked me any questions. I'm like, very interesting. Give me a little more data. Well, our boss had given us a problem a couple of days before. I came into the meeting fully loaded, excited, this brilliant idea. Everyone knows I'm the best problem solver. I came in this idea, and that's how they treated me. I said, okay, you're ready for a little emotional intelligence. I said, you told everyone in that group what to do, and they obeyed you. Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no group of people exhibits the exact same behavior at the exact same time without a catalyst. So what'd you tell them? She goes, I didn't tell them anything. I said, you sent a message that day, and they sent a message back. What message did you send? She thought about it for a minute, had a little aha moment, Tom. Yeah. And she's like, oh my gosh. I guess my message was, hey guys, I'm smarter than all of you. I really don't need you. Just do it my way. Yeah. I said, that sounds pretty much like the message you delivered. And what message did they send you with their body language? We're not interested.
Yeah.
They weren't being jerks. They were just responding back. So she goes, well, what do you recommend? I said, well, so we got into step 3, action plan. If I were you, humility is the great reset button. I'd go back to that next meeting and say, hey, guys, I think I screwed up last time. Can we start again? And she started, here's the problem. And she went around and got everybody's input first. And together they created the synergy. And they came up with an amazing idea altogether. And I said, when you first had that great idea and you told me how great it was, I pictured you driving down the highway in a bright red sports car convertible. Your hair is blowing in the breeze. You're holding the wheel and you're feeling good about you because it feels good to be so dang smart, right? She goes, right. Yeah, it kind of feels that way to have a great idea. I said, you're a mom, right? Yeah. Do you have a minivan? Actually, I do. Do you want to be a great leader? Yeah. I said, never leave a meeting without everyone on your team in your minivan.
That's right.
They do not need you to be the smartest person in the room. As a matter of fact, it's destructive and annoying. What they need you to be is a leader. Within 9 months, she was promoted to head of her division. that one part of her emotional intelligence. Her boss, when he hired her, said, Vince, she's one of the smartest people I ever met, but she can't get out of her own way. Every meeting is about her. Every story is about her. Every past history is about her. Everything was about, hey, everybody, here I am. Yeah. I'm the smart one. When she got over that and got over that part of her independence, it changes everything. So that's what we do with EQ. You just pick 3, come up with an action plan, and all of a sudden people are saying, what happened to Tom? Yeah. He was such a pain in the butt before.
Now he's wonderful.
I couldn't stand meeting with him because he turned everything everybody said into something about, oh, yeah, I already thought that. Oh, yeah, that was, I remember I did that. Really, Tom? Is this the Tom hour? Or is this? So that's where EQ makes great leaders.
I like it.
Does that make sense?
It makes a ton of sense. And as you're going through those examples, I can picture just events in my own life, in my experiences, and all the different people I've worked for and worked with. I can recognize those types of behaviors. And then you just wonder sometimes, that self-reflection, right? So again, bringing it back to the whole safety aspect, you've got to think of yourself as, okay, when I am at work and say I'm managing a business, or I am managing a job site, or I'm not managing anything, I'm there to pull wire or terminate receptacles. How am I working as a team? How am I? Are people on the site just irritated with me to a point where it's like, because eventually it's like, well, we don't want him on the project. We want him on the project, or her on the project. Exactly. Because you become that caustic individual, and eventually everybody recognizes it. And that's why I asked about, I could sit down and do my review, and I could think, I always think we look at ourselves through rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, totally.
It's hard to say, and I think that's a part of emotional intelligence, that whole process, because okay, so you have step 1 is reading through all of these 15 pieces, and you're going to understand them, right?
Yeah.
You have step 2 is you have to do that self-awareness to recognize, where am I strong and where am I weak? And I think, in my opinion, I think you might need, you need a coach for that. You need a third party, because I could look down through it and say, I think I'm strong in all of these things, and I can give you examples why. But unless someone else gets to know you, they say, well, Tom, based upon what I've experienced, I think you need some work here, here, and here, and then give you that homework to do, right?
Yeah.
Then you got step 3 is learn more about each of those characteristics, and which is when you start to isolate, right? So I'm going to pick these areas that I think I need improvement, and you're going to learn a lot more. And I liked your example of look at the reflection of people when you're when you're doing your next interaction. And I could say even on a job site or a project, when you're doing the pre-planning or anything at work related, it's just, how do people perceive me? Step 4 is create the action plan. It's like, okay, now I've recognized, here are my opportunities.
Yeah.
And then what am I going to do? And that's, again, I don't know. I think you need coaching for that, in my opinion. Yeah. You could read books. You could do all that good stuff. But you really need someone to say, who has that experience, here's what you need to do next, and here's what I would recommend, and then explore that together. And I like your step 5, stay on the journey, because it never stops.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop.
Yeah. And I like what you were saying about the need for, and let's say your company's not paying for a coach for you. You can simply, let's say you read the book and you came up with, hey, here's some areas I think, pick 5 people in your company that you know pretty well, that interact with you, and say, can I get a half hour with each of you separately? And just say, hey, I'm working through this, but I know I have blind spots. Can you tell me how I come across in this area? Can you tell me Like,
Yeah.
do I build confidence or do I make people feel stupid? Like, so I actually did this with, I was at one place, this before I got into the full EQ. And I thought I was, always leading teams, and I was dealing though with emotional expression. I was like, okay, I want to understand. I think I come across this way. I asked some people, and so I asked a few people, tell me, how do I show up in certain areas where you feel like that maybe there's some things I'm not aware of. So this one person, she really, I mean, it wasn't mean. She's a friend of mine. She goes, Vince, when you're at a meeting and someone pushes back on your idea and they kind of reject it, you kind of, you get this funny look on your face. You get a little, you try to smile, but you got this little bit of like, you got constipation or something. But you try like, over trying to win them. She goes, it's pretty obvious what you're doing. I'm like, oh, really? And then she pointed out a couple other things of like, she goes, if you've ever felt like you kind of could have done better on something, your face turns a little red and you get a little embarrassed. Really?
Yeah.
I still do that? I thought that was just when I was 12. Yeah. Oh, no, I see you. And then you kind of lean back in your chair and you cross your arms. Oh, interesting. I didn't see myself until someone just said. So I think everyone at any job should have some people that are their peers.
Yeah.
That they could just say, hey, I gave that presentation at that meeting. Could you give me just a little bit of feedback? What went well and what maybe did I miss? Oh, did you notice that Mary, when you started talking about that, she pushed her chair back from the table, crossed her arms, and kind of was disengaged? Oh, I didn't see that. And did you see this person do this? Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
None of us see very clearly, Tom.
No,
and so I always ask people, help me see what I can't see. So even if you don't get a coach, you can still even take this book and say, hey, could you guys just read this one chapter? Here's how I evaluated myself. Could you give me some input?
I like it.
Those people will feel honored, and you'll be way wiser than you were before you started.
Yeah, and you know what else it does, I think? You're building relationships.
Mm-hmm.
When I think about people ask me about codes and standards, and I'll tell them, codes and standards and what we do is a relationship business, and we're all working to increase safety. I might think I have a great idea. Yeah. And then I talk to you and you give me a different perspective and I go, wow, that's not such a great idea. If I can't bend my reality a little bit to say, maybe I didn't have the best idea here. Maybe he doesn't have the best idea and she doesn't have the best idea. But based on all 3 or 4 of those opinions, this is really the right way to go. And then you become a leader because now what you've done is you've said, look, I've listened to your feedback. I've listened to her feedback and his feedback. Maybe this is where we need to go because we're all sort of on cue, but, and then all of a sudden, if I think about code panel, like I sit on code panel 2 and panel 10 for the National Electrical Code, I sit on other committees and we try to come to consensus. Yeah. Consensus is driven through compromise. Yes. Yeah. And if you don't realize you're digging your heels in, if you don't realize, and I know I do this, I have tales that, I would be a poor poker player. Oh my God, I'd be a horrible poker player. I could come home and Bobby Joe could tell me right off the bat exactly if I had a good day, I had a bad day. She knows if she can tell, she'll say, well, you're not telling me everything. And then it's just I'm just like I wear my heart on my sleeve. Oh yeah. Yeah. And other people can too. And when you sit down at a panel or a code panel or in a meeting, And to your point, I like that analogy. You want everybody on the bus, on your bus.
Yeah, that's right.
And sometimes your bus's direction or your minivan's direction may have been going north, but when you leave that meeting room, it may be going northwest.
Yeah, that's right.
You had to change your perspective because other people's opinions do matter and can formulate your direction. I like it.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, so we've gone through the 5 steps. We gave a general overview of the self-awareness and all this, and I think, is it our plan to go and do some shorter deep dives into each of these, the self-awareness, self-expression, interpersonal? What are your thoughts?
If we could. I'd like to maybe dig in, and even in the book, I kind of give a little bit of a short definition. So let's say even those watching, grab a pen and paper, and I'll walk through the 15 areas one at a time. And what I want to do is just have you do a little pre-assessment here. Does that sound good, Tom? You want to do that?
Okay. So let me ask. Now, we've been going for, I'm looking at the time, so over an hour. Do we want to just say, look, let's close this session?
Sure.
And then what we'll do is, for all of you watching, what we'll do is we're going to close this session. And then because we did a really good overview, I think people have this understanding of how emotional intelligence weighs in on electrical safety and safe work practices. And then what we'll do is we'll close this session out, and then we will take that self-assessment, and that will be a separate video for all of you watching during Shock Week. That's going to be a separate video, and we'll do a self-assessment together with Vince Barlow.
Sounds good. I'm all in.
Thank you, Vince. Okay, so this session has been really good. It's helped me. I told you, we had this discussion the other day that I said, look, we don't want to get too in deep with it before we have this meeting or we have our recording, because I want it to be off the cuff. I want it to be real, and I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot today. I learned a lot in this last little over an hour, and I appreciate it very much. So.
Good. Well, let me grab a glass of water, and then we'll get rolling into part 2.
All right, and I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. So thanks, everybody.
Okay.
Stay tuned. Take care. Stay safe. Please stay healthy.